Welcome to the Lovecars on the Grid podcast, your global motorsport roundup with me, Tiffany Dell, and Paul Woodman.
Well, welcome to Lovecars on the Grid, your global motorsport podcast. We look back at thunderstorms in Miami, an Indycar procession, same for World Superbikes in Italy, drama aplenty in Texas NASCAR, plus Formula E's in Monaco, World GT-ees at Brands Hatch, and BSB-ees kick off their season at Oulton Park. But first, sad news. We mourn the loss of Jochen Mass, who passed away at the age of 78. On Sunday. Well, I mean, you know him better than most.
Well, you met him when we filmed our famous Porsche item.
I met him a few times. So I met him there when we filmed the Group C, and then you know when you meet somebody, you sort of bump into them, and he loves showing WhatsApp videos and stuff, and he's got so many stories. Amazing character, and of course, won a Formula One, Spanish Grand Prix, and many times
Le Mans once as well. Yeah. I mean, he wasn't an Ayrton Senna. He was a very good, solid racing driver. And he did, I don't know how many Grand Prix. He was in there for about 5 or 6
14,
seasons.
I think.
Was it 14?
It might be completely wrong. Okay.
Yeah, done way more. He was actually in the Merchant Navy. His girlfriend took him to a hill climb or something. He thought, I quite fancy this. He was only 25 years old. No karting, no Formula 4, Formula 3. You could do it back in those days. He got adopted by Ford Cologne quite early on. Got sponsored by Ford. Made his Grand Prix debut in about 1974, I think, or 72. Raced for Surtees, McLaren, ATS, Arrows. And just had that one when it was that horrendous Spanish Grand Prix at Montjuic Park when the barriers weren't fixed properly and there were lots of crashes. Fittipaldi wouldn't race there. And then Rolf Stommelin had this awful accident in a hill, went over the barriers and sadly killed some photographers and marshals. But it was stopped at half distance, or just over half distance. So Jochen only got half points. His one Grand Prix win was half points. It was actually the Grand Prix when Lella Lombardi famous got the only point, half a point for a woman driver, which she qualified 6th, I think 2 laps down. There were only 8 finishers from the 24-car grid, so it was a historic race.
Well, I remember him telling me that he was leading the race at the Nürburgring.
Well, that's the one he should have won, and that's the one he wouldn't, because he was the only one. He loved the Nürburgring, and he'd started the race on slicks, whereas everybody else was on wets. And survived the first lap on slicks. And then he apparently had like a 25-second lead. So everybody at the end of the first lap stopped from take wets off, whereas Jochen was now leading. And of course, Lauda had his crash and the race was red flagged and the win was taken away from him, the win that never happened. I mean, just a lovely, so unlike most racing drivers. You said he joked about videos and he turned up with Goodwood. I was still racing against him at Goodwood at the revival last year, was when I last saw him.
Oh.
And so, a lovely man. So he'll be sadly missed.
So you never raced with him in terms of in the same car. You did with Derek Bell and lots of others.
Well, yeah, he was. So his big thing was the Rothmans Porsches. So he raced when I was racing at Le Mans throughout the 80s. We were both on the same track. I wasn't particularly racing against him with his Rothmans Porsche.
They were quite dynamic. We were quite special, those cars.
He moved to Sauber. Sauber was when he got his Le Mans win. So he did. He was still going. So just a great career, mainly sports car racing, but very versatile touring cars, everything else. So,
and 78's not old these days. I mean, you're only a few years off that, mate. I hate to tell you, I'm not that far behind. Let's before we go into Miami, let's a bit of news around, and I want to start off with telling you one word and get your reaction. Lego.
Well, don't stand on them.
Didn't you see it? Didn't you see the Lego race?
I've seen the picture this morning. No, was it a race?
It was amazing. No. That was better than the race. Yeah, it was. They were in these amazing Lego cars that were built by Lego, and replicas with the sponsors' details and everything.
Pictures. Did every team have them? The 10 cars were there.
Yeah, they ended up literally having like a proper race. They're doing their lap, and the drivers are laughing their heads off, and they all had a really good laugh doing it. So Lego was a big winner in Miami. Something else that I've got to mention to you as well. This stat, I know you don't like stats, but this stat just blows my mind. there's now been more races, Formula One races, hosted in the USA than Germany and the UK.
I saw
Can
that.
you believe that?
Well, no, I saw that. Have they included Indianapolis? Because they were World
Well,
Championship races.
What,
Because
Formula One? So I don't know.
does it say
but
Formula One? Does it?
Formula One?
I know.
Yeah.
I thought of bothering to start checking that one out because it surprised me. But you know, because they.
Well, it's from Autosport, so
I know
that's where
that
I
must be
got it
true,
from.
but I do.
Well,
There's some catch about using the Indianapolis 500 for 6 or 7 years, but I really don't because we've had a race every year in Britain since it was invented.
Exactly. Of course,
Whereas,
and
America missed out on several years, and certainly missed out if you don't count Indianapolis, which was for 6 or 7 years. The first 6 or 7 years, I think, was a World Championship race.
Please tell me they're not including Canada in that statistic. I mean, that would be wrong. That'd be like saying
did it say North America then?
No, it just said America. It didn't say North America. It said America.
Didn't say USA then.
United States. So it is the United States of America.
Well,
yeah.
I'll need to look at this another day when I've got a boring hour to do. I should check that one out. But yeah, it's amazing.
But then when you consider Spa's on rotation, Zandvoort's been cancelled, and Miami has had a 16-year extension.
Yeah, I saw that.
What does that tell you? But it's not. I mean, that is nuts for me. But there's not a single American driver on the grid. They must be desperate for one in Formula One.
There should be next year.
Who?
We're the Cadillac. Well, we won next year. I'm fairly sure.
Yeah. Well, Perez is probably going to be there with Cadillac.
Yeah, Perez and in America. I mean, Perez and the most obvious one is the one whose name we always name is forget his name.
Who are you talking about? Palau? Not Logan Sargent, obviously.
American. Always forget his name. Every time we do this, you leave me up a garden
not your mate,
path.
Not your mate, Carl Larson.
No, page 4. I get that. I'm trying to get to the IndyCar race. No, we're spending way too much talking about this. Colton Herta.
Colton. Yeah,
because he's with Andretti, isn't he now? So Andretti of the link. And of course, he was offered that drive with whoever it was, and then refused his super license, wasn't he?
Yes, exactly. Which is just the most ridiculous thing ever. But anyway, let's go to Miami.
Yes, I mean, loads of entertainment. I missed the Lego race, I must confess. But, there was loads of entertainment there with the sprint race starting. I sort of didn't like it at first, but of course, he's got 3 DRSs, so they just keeps the racing going for lap after lap for reasonably equal cars, for cars that are painted papaya. It allows them to disappear into the distance. So it's got some good corners, and it seems to have got a festive period, and they love it. The Americans love it. So I'm allowing it to be an acceptable circuit. Having seen what Madrid are making and accepting that Monaco's a procession.
I thought it was actually quite good. I thought there's quite a bit of overtaking.
What, Madrid? That Madrid circuit?
No, not Madrid. Miami.
That's what I said. Yeah, that's what I was saying. Yeah, that's what I was saying. Yeah, so it works. We'll accept it. Silly, tight chicane, which the drivers all hated, but it provides a bit of drama. But the sprint was always about this tight schedule, isn't it? I love sprints because it's like Q1. You've all got to use the same tyres, and the time is so short that if you mess up on your first attempt, you might, like poor old Yuki and Behrman, not make it to start the second attempt, and then if you don't get a second attempt, you're out in Q1, which happened to Yuki and Ollie. So it's a very pressurized, short qualifying session, which I enjoy. I love the fact that on Friday you've got one practice session, and then you've got this qualifying, which could be dramatic and produce an incredibly dramatic pole position drive from this stunning young Italian. Antonelli on pole. I mean, it's sort of. It's a bit of Alan Prostish way. He doesn't look quick. When you see his laps, he's very contained within himself, very precise. And it was a brilliant lap.
It's so funny that you're mentioning this because I agree, but I was saving it to the race to say that he's the polar opposite. As soon as he's under a bit of pressure in the race, not the sprint, and he was all over the place, and he really showed his immaturity there because he was all over the place, which was such a shame. I wanted, like everybody, I guess, I wanted him to do well, especially after his stunning pole position, as you say. But that soon. And probably, again, for his immaturity, he probably should have just conceded one place. It's easy to say that now. We've all got a PhD in hindsight, tucked in behind him. And but anyway.
Which Lando might be thinking he should have done in the Grand Prix when we come to that.
Exactly.
So Lando's still making it. Yes, he's still got the racecraft and he gets a bit carried away. So he's still got to be, although he doesn't appear typically Italian when he's interviewed, so calm and thoughtful. There's obviously a bit of Italian attack mode when he gets races going. So end up, with the two McLarens out front in the end, didn't it, after the first corner shenanigans. And of course, they started on intermediates, didn't they? We'd already lost one Ferrari, Leclerc, and in the sighting lap, the rain came down. I don't know what the time was, because I sort of caught up with it on television, between a completely flooded circuit that saw people aquaplaning off, to then all of a sudden they were on the grid on intermediates, and the track was almost dry. I mean, incredibly how quickly it dried out there.
But it didn't, because then they did a few laps under the safety car and the spray was just horrendous.
Okay.
So it looked like it.
Yeah. And then eventually they got the race going. It was quite exciting because Lando was catching up with Oscar, wasn't he, towards the end of when the intermediates were wearing out. And then Lando was handed another Miami victory by a virtual safety car. So that was all fun. Lando got a win.
Who crashed? Why was there?
Well, that was the other thing I was coming to, was the Alonso crash against Lawson.
Yes.
And
thank you.
Again, they blamed Lawson in the end, didn't they? I think, because I like the new regulations. More and more we're hearing about the new overtaking law. We talked about it last week, of getting your front wheel level with a mirror. I'm here. I've got the corner. I'm on the inside. If you've now got to back out, I'm not going to give you room on the outside. But as someone said, that if you go around the outside, it's a different. You've got to be a different length ahead. But whatever. Lawson was completely alongside going around the apex of that hairpin. And then Alonso just ran him off the road, which I thought with the new regulations was definitely not happening. Fernando probably not too pleased with himself in general at the moment, so in a bad mood. He probably thought, because they had a row, didn't they? The circuit of Cota last year, in about Lawson's first Grand Prix, wouldn't let Alonso pass, and Fernando got all upset and was pouting off. So yes, we had the safety car, and dear old Lando overtook Oscar. It also allowed. Who else moved up? Who was third and fourth in the end? I can't remember.
I'm not going to buy a lottery ticket today.
Oh dear. So it was an entertaining sprint day. What were the qualifying and then the rain and the starting on intermediates?
You didn't mention who got on the podium. Lewis.
Well, yes, and then Lewis was another one to benefit hugely. He stopped early, didn't he, for slicks, I think, because he had nothing else to gamble on. Everyone else sort of stayed. The trouble is that when the pack's very close, even the leaders daren't pit first to go to slicks. So they'll be 15th and they'll be stuck in the pack. So you've got to hang out. But Lando had no reason to, not Lando. Lewis had no reason to stay out running 12th or wherever he was. So he popped on the slicks early and he benefited. So I was back on a podium in a Ferrari again, which the only two podiums of Ferrari. Now, has Leclerc been on a podium this year? Gosh,
not this year, no.
Oh,
well, let's go on to the main race, because the sprint was interesting. Of course,
we had the pit release. The other big drama, of course, was Red Bull letting Max go straight into the side of Kimi. And Kimi was just turning in to go to his pit stop. It could have wiped out 12 mechanics.
How can you get that so wrong? That's a major human error. He wasn't even looking. It didn't look like he was looking. He sort of head down. Okay, you go. You're released, mate. Terrible. But if that was this what I think a lot of people have a bit of a thing with Horner, because if that happened the other way around, what they would have said in the press about it, Mercedes done this, it's unsafe, they should be banned from the grid. He would have gone absolutely mental.
Well, he will, of course, return at the end of the Grand Prix story, Mr. Horner. Talking about Mr. Horner. Oh,
yes.
Win. Grand Prix. Hamilton out in Q2 was the sort of qualifying headline. Still not gelling with that Ferrari, is he? I mean, he seems to come racing well, because Oh, and then in the sprint race, I think. Oh, of course, he was out early, so that got him out on slicks. But and as we come to the Grand Prix itself in the race, he seems to perform. But getting the qualifying laps out of it, he just doesn't seem to be there. Meanwhile, up front, there was another brilliant qualifying session with thousands of seconds separating, with Max yet again. It won't stop, it won't turn. Oh, I'm on pole position now. I mean, brilliant.
They do talk again. They do talk it down so much. Oh, the car's useless. The car won't go.
That's the thing about the sprint race, wasn't it? I can't see anything.
Yeah. Carlos Sainz said, I mean, they've got to stop this. He put it in writing on his Instagram. He said the car was damaged so badly that it hindered our performance. Mate, you were on it. The car was just a rocket ship. It wasn't damaged so badly. It wasn't. There was damage to the car, but it wasn't.
Oh, no.
They over exaggerate. I've got no brakes. I can't turn. I can't see.
So Lando, of course, for the main qualifying, out-qualified Oscar by 2 places. So this was it. Fine, it's Lando's turn, and we'll get the championship will be tighter because Lando is now going to be ahead of Oscar, who had a bad qualifying session to become 4th, split by this young, still fast on his own in qualifying, Antonelli, but yet to prove himself so much in race trim. Again, with George back in 5th place. The amazing Williams, 6th and 7th, Sainz fraction ahead of
Albon.
And then Yuki, 10th, 0.7 down, still not getting his Red Bull going, or still the Red Bull's not that good and not drivable by anybody except Max. But Yuki keeps having sort of messy weekends. I think maybe when he comes back to track, he knows more. He's going to get that gap down. I think in SP3 he was pretty close to Max, but then his qualifying does Yuki's brain, isn't he? He keeps on making mistakes in the actual qualifying laps. Then, of course, so we had the turn 1 drama, which was always Max versus Lando. And I don't know. Again, I think Max should have been penalised. But the trouble is the stewards now, they can't, there's nobody that, as I said last time, they need a race director. That just one person that, okay, you'll have good days and bad days like football referees, but swings and roundabouts, you'll get a good call. But I think he should have been called straight away to give that place back. But, once the race is established, and the cars are all spread out, you have to give your 5-second or your 10-second penalty, but he wasn't given any penalty at all, despite running Lando off the road after on turn 2. But I haven't got the full regulation for the outside overtaking. I understand the inside overtaking is front wheel to mirrors, but he was fully alongside. If anything, he was half a nose ahead of. But I think the stewards let it off because it's the first lap, isn't it? It's racing incidents, and they allow that leniency of a car going wide. And Max did have a bit of a slide, but Mark Hughes, the very respected journalist, I read his story this morning, and he sort of said, well, yes, the car did snap a bit, which the stewards could say unfortunately pushed Lando off the road. But he sort of said, but of course, slides like that can be created by very talented drivers to make it look like they're a bit out of control and giving them room. But whatever, Max led and Oscar got through, which ruined it for us. For Lando lovers, as it were. Or for the race, it ruined the race for him. We're still waiting, really, for a head-to-head McLaren race. It seems like every race, one of them cocks up or something.
You know what's going to happen? I'll tell you what's going to happen. It'll be exactly the same carbon copy of Ferrari, Lewis and Charles later in the race when, okay, I'm faster than him. Yep, you are. So let you go in front. And then they'll get in front and they say, oh, no, I'm faster than him. So then they'll do it.
But McLaren say they're not going to let that happen. McLaren say they won't let that happen. Not if they're racing for place.
Trust me, they will let that happen. They will. Of course,
Lando dropped about 6th, didn't he? So Oscar got held up by Max, which I was enjoying. So I still I'm biased towards Lando, but only marginally. I just want to see those two have a proper head-to-head. And Max defends so well. He knows the rules. And he leaves it so late to just block. He's sitting there in the straight line. How he looks in his mirror while doing 200 miles an hour, whatever, you know, between concrete walls. And he's catching me. Is he catching me? Do I need to block? I'll block. You know, well, sometimes he doesn't block when he knows he's got that extra 2 meters of lead and he knows he won't get dive bombed. So he held off Oscar for about 3 or 4 very entertaining laps. Meanwhile, Lando was getting by the Mercedes and slowly catching up. But he had a harder job of getting by Max. And again, we've talked about Lando doing this other tracks, haven't we? That you seem to make the wrong places to do the dive bomb, which then he didn't have the opportunity at the second DRS place.
Yeah.
So one still questions Lando's choices of when to go for his overtakes and when not to.
Don't forget, we've had Senna, Schumacher, Hamilton. Now it's Lando's turn. He's not in the same league, I'm sorry.
No, I don't think he is yet. No, he's still got to mature. But
Verstappen is.
But the gap was 8 seconds when he eventually got by Max. So the race was... But there was so much going on. The good thing about the race in general, we had lots of other battles. We had the Williams, Carlos says that Williams said whole positions, and a lap later, Albon just went past him and pissed him off. So whether one hadn't heard, maybe Alex hadn't heard the radio message or chose not to hear the radio message. So the Williams boys are getting a bit spicy with each other, which is always good.
Well, it's so close with those two now. So they both want to prove themselves. I tell you, there's a good chance that Carlos will finish ahead of Lewis this year in a Williams versus a Ferrari. Oh my goodness!
No. Well, of course, he had a dive on Lewis on the last lap of the race, didn't he? Trying to get past him.
Poor Carlos, I love him.
He moved under braking.
He said he moved a little bit under braking. He was trying to come back from like 50 yards at the dive bomb.
I was still hoping for the rain, because I thought the rain might spice up the battle between the two McLarens if it came, but it never came.
Tiff, I agree, but as a driver, if you're out in front and something like that affects the race, it's awful. It's just I didn't want a pace car or a full course. I just wanted a race in the rain. Yeah,
I think then the better driver can go. The gaps can come down more in the wet. But then the Ferrari fun was going on. I mean, that was, as you said, so always the second driver catches up in DRS.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, of course, I'm going faster. Well, of course you're going faster. But to be fair to Lewis, he had the softer tyre on. So he was going quicker without...
He was on a bit of a charge.
Yeah.
They probably should have let him through.
But Charlie's saying, I am pacing it. I'm going to catch Antonelli. Yeah. I don't wear my tyres out now. I want to keep my tyres, so I am going to overtake Antonelli later on. But no, Lewis, so let Lewis by for about 3 or 4 laps. And of course, by the time Lewis was then ahead of Leclerc, the advantage of his medium tyre was wearing out. So he was no longer quicker. So then Charles says, I want to go back again for Antonelli. And eventually they agreed. The best one, I thought, I can't remember all of Lewis's quotes, but the best one was, shall I let Sainz by now? Did you hear that one?
Yeah, I did, yeah.
Having let Charles by, said, do you want me to let Sainz pass now?
Do you want me to let him pass as well? Yeah,
yeah, exactly. Something like that. Then, of course, we had the virtual safety car, which allowed Russell to jump Max. And Albon finishes 5th, Ferrari 6th and 7th. And Yuki got a point, but I'm sure he won't be that happy with his point. So plenty going on.
George Russell just turns up, doesn't do much. I know that's a bit...
Ends on the podium.
It ends up... How many times has he done that? Every race other than the last race, I think.
Oh, dear.
Crazy.
Then Lando had a bit of a go at Max, saying, well, you'd have finished 3rd, Max. You didn't muck about with me so much. You'd have been 3rd anyway. But
he flipped him the bird as well. Lando flipped Max the bird, yeah.
And then Max then said, well, I don't care, 3rd or 4th. I'm not winning. And then we had the Christian Horner. Then we had the Red Bull protests. Oh, I think Christian Horner goes to his bedtime reading is the rule book, and I think he just reads every paragraph 100 times.
Well, yeah,
over.
because now he can't send WhatsApp messages allegedly. He needs to occupy himself allegedly with something else.
I don't know.
But it's good to know that. It's good to know the rules. It's good to know them inside out. That's his job as the boss, surely.
I know, but then he picks on. He didn't back off enough under the yellow flag, was his accusation for George, but. The stewards looked at the information and he lifted off the throttle for long enough. I mean, it's so marginal, isn't it, that how much do you lift under a yellow flag? But I haven't written all the results. Who else had a good or bad race? After the top 10, I don't really know who else. Behrman had a bit of an off. Behrman got up to about 12th or 13th and then had an engine.
Yeah, but that was only through pit stops though. And
other people dropping. He had a bad weekend. And really, Ocon didn't. I don't know what happened to Ocon in the race because he was in the top 10, wasn't he, in qualifying, but he dropped down badly.
Of course, it started with Doohan and Gasly coming together.
No, Doohan and Lawson on turn
Lawson,
one.
Sorry, I beg your pardon. Lawson.
Yeah, they're saying again today he's going to get replaced. But I mean, in the sprint qualifying, he raged at the team because they didn't get him out to do that one lap. So he was kicked out. And then in the first corner, I think Lawson closed the door on him. I don't think that was his fault, to be honest. I think he was on the inside. So I'm feeling sorry for him badly. Aston Martin's still rubbish. Alonso spinning on his own.
What's all that about?
Oh, dear.
A man of his caliber doing that. It's just literally spinning on his own.
So, in
the dry.
Aston Martin depressed. Williams on the top of a wave, crest of a wave, but with a bit of in-house aggro beginning. So, yeah.
Well, you say that, but I think everybody wants to beat their co-driver.
Yeah.
They're both nice guys.
Very nice guy.
I mean, Alex Albon, I think he's a lovely guy.
Yeah.
And he gets a bit of stick online saying that he's always complaining, always negative. Yeah,
what?
I don't see that. I always see him with a big cheesy smile and happy. And
he was in a jet, wasn't he? I didn't watch the whole film.
I would love to do that.
Because they took off. He's smiling when they take off. And then about 2 seconds after takeoff, the bloke flips it upside down. And he's still got that wonderful big smile on his face.
Exactly. I'm surprised James Vowles did so well, because normally the G-force stuff makes
he was
makes
in one
sick.
as well. That's right. Yeah, I didn't watch the whole film. I haven't seen that.
Yeah, it was really good. I'm very envious. I'd love to go up in a fighter jet like that.
I didn't watch the whole grid walk. I saw Martin Brundle at the end of the sort of grid walk. Rather bizarre. There seemed to be some celeb zone with no celebs in it.
Oh, it just cheeses me off. They made such a thing about
Ben the boxer.
Of course, they got to go to Jerry Bruckheimer, whatever his name is, the producer of the F1 film, because Brundle's in it. Okay. No, I'm sure that's not the reason they went to him. But then they went to made such a fuss about going to see Conor Ben, and then he wanted to talk to this girl Lisa, who's a singer, Lisa.
K-pop or something. My son tells me
she's 2 meters away. She can see him clearly, and just how do these people just ignore somebody like that? It's beyond me.
But then bizarrely, Jackie Stewart's standing there. He's
again. Remember, you did that before with Federer, I think it was.
So Brundle had to ask Jackie. I don't know what Jackie was doing there.
But it's just so bizarre. Just talk to the camera. You're there for Formula One. This is Formula One. If you want to be incognito, piss off. Or
I'd ignore the celebrities. But I'd ignore the celebrities. Go and speak to the team managers about tactics.
There weren't that many celebrities. Well, certainly on his grid walk, there weren't that many, considering it's Miami, baby. But just before we leave Miami, F1 Academy.
Yep. Good race on the surf. Race 1 was exciting because it was a reverse grid race. But Dorian Pain came through. In fact, the top 3 on the grid ended up finishing first, second, and third but at reverse. So pole position, Chloe Chambers was third, and Palmowski was second, and Pan was first. So it's good racing going on. But then the leaders lost their big chance because they rained off race. They didn't get their proper race.
But Ella Lloyd in the McLaren, I don't know what she's doing with the brakes, but then the car went off into the biggest area ever, off the track, miles off the track, and they put a safety car out for one car that's miles off the track. Just wave yellow flags. They got all the telemetry, so you can't.
You're talking about ladies racing. In fact, talking about regulations and ladies racing, I think it was the qualifying session back in Saudi. There was a girl sitting, she'd crashed or broken down, I can't remember which. So she was sitting behind where the marshals are with a helmet on and everything, hot Saudi day. And the commentator says, she took her crash helmet on. And the whoever was commentating with him said, it's now a regulation that if you're out of the car, you must keep your crash helmet on until the end of the session. Can you imagine? I know. I haven't checked it out. But you imagine,
No.
imagine you're 3/4 of the way through a really hot race and you crash and you're a bit, and you have to keep your helmet, even though you're behind all the barriers.
No.
Yeah, that's what they said. They have to keep their helmets on now. That's what he
So
said.
if you crash out on the first lap and you
Yeah,
get back to
yes.
the pits, you've
Yeah.
got to walk around the pits with your helmet.
According to what the
Oh, I don't
commentator-
believe it.
But it was one of the expert analysts. I don't know which one. Who does the expert analysis for football? I don't know. Anyway, I must check that out.
Harry
Please
Benjamin
let us know. Let us know. Someone
sometimes
tell us.
listens to our podcast. He is the guru, the oracle. So Harry, if you're listening, please
Formula
comment below.
F1 Academy helmet keeping on rules.
Wow.
Anyway, so they didn't know their main race, but they're a feisty bunch up front at the moment. There's been some good racing. How fast they are, whoever knows, but they're racing.
Well, we know they're doing all right. You know,
Doing
Jamie
all right,
Chadwick and
Yeah.
Abby
Yeah.
Pulling, and they're doing all right.
Yeah.
They're doing really well.
So staying in America, Indycar, a bore for a
Bit of a
snooze
procession,
fest.
wasn't it?
Oh.
Yeah.
And the trouble is, again, it's magnificent. A bit like sort of Grand Prix drivers going to Suzuka. The drivers love this Barber Motorsport. It undulates, it dips, it dives. It's got every different type of corner. But they're never ending from one corner, short, straight, another corner. And so it's all about qualifying. And IndyCar's the driver quality is going further and further down the grid. So there's not many Muppets there that'll crash or fall over each other. So it's just about qualifying. And Alex Palau, who's just this talent that just seems to be supreme in the IndyCars, so he's 3 times champion. I think he's going for like 4 in a row or something. And nothing looks like stopping him this year. He was on pole position. And it's all about tyres. They got this, 3 stops, 4 sets of tyres. You have to use both sets, a bit like in Formula One, but the red alternate was much quicker than the black primary. So it depended. There was a bit of strategy involved, but because there's no full course yellows, an American motorsport racing we talked about NASCAR's the same nowadays. They're just not crashing or breaking down or blowing up engines often enough for the way American motorsports worked for so many years. The full course yellows, the rolling start restarts, the drama. And there were no full course yellows for a whole race. Nobody retired. And it's now 3 races in a row for IndyCar where they've had no full course yellows. And in fact, that's the first time they've had 3 races in a row with no full course yellows since 1986, according to statisticians. So they need these to make IndyCar, because the cars are getting more scientific, so they're getting more like Formula One cars. They've got downforce, driving talent, as I said, is very level. So all 27 finished. Palau won it. The best mover was Christian Lundgaard in second, who came from 7th on the grid. Scott McLaughlin was 3rd, 2nd on the grid. So the top, 8 were all in the top 8 in qualifying, pretty much. But I mean, the only good thing is they're spectacular cars. You see all the opposite lot, the understeer, oversteer. The track has just got rough edges and grass edges. So there's plenty of people running a bit wide, kicking over dust.
Yeah.
So you get a bit of drama around such a magnificent looking circuit.
I have to say, going back to Formula One, there was a lot of very, very, very close wheel-to-wheel racing this weekend in Miami. I don't know why that was, because smaller track, I guess, narrower track, but because you see that every week in IndyCar, but there seemed to be quite a lot in Miami.
No, but definitely, embarrassingly for IndyCar, Formula One definitely out-entertained the IndyCar race. Actually, talk about tyres. It's something that reflects to what Monaco are doing. What IndyCar now, because of this processional problem, for the next race at the Indianapolis road course, which again is a tyre strategy, boring race normally, they're insisting they use 2 of the alternates and 2 of the primaries. So you can't just have a quick session. Sometimes if there's a safety car, you'll get rid of the slower tyre that's only done 5 laps maybe, and then you can just stay on the faster tyre for the whole race. So they're saying now you have to use 2 sets of the primaries and 2 sets of the alternates, which at Monaco, with this new 2-stop idea, which people like, just to try and mix it up, someone said you should use all 3 tyres, which I like. You've got 3 stints. So, but they're not going to enforce that. You still have to use 2 different types for Monaco. So you've got 2 stops, and you have to use 2 different types of tyre. I quite like 3. They've got 3 different sets there, so use them all. So sorry, IndyCar, that was a bore. And then World Superbikes coming back to Europe. just to say, all three races was Bulliger pulling away from Razgatlioglu, pulling away from Bautista. I've never seen them so spread out. Same result in all three races. Sam Lowe's had a fourth and a fifth. So he did quite well for Britain. But yeah,
Where was it? Spain, wasn't it? No, Italy.
Cremona.
Yeah, Cremona.
I don't know where the track is. So they were a bit boring. But then NASCAR was exciting back in America. It was a good race. Again, but not every race is exciting. This
Texas,
was
yeah.
1.5 mile. And there's like a lot of American tracks. I think it might be different reasons. There's a bump. And quite often, like at Daytona, there's one there. It's where the tunnel comes into the centre underneath the bank track. There always seems to be a bit of subsidence where they made the tunnel. I don't know why. And there was the bump. And the bump at Texas caused drama aplenty throughout the whole race. Josh Berry, who was leading at the time, was lapping someone. And the commentators were saying the higher up the lanes you are, the higher up the banking, the bigger the bump is. And he was pushed a bit wide, lapping someone, hit the bump. He crashed out on his own. Former champions Kyle Busch and Chase Elliott both lost control on the bump. You know, it shows how on the edge these NASCARs are. Much as people think they're just driving round and round in circles, you know, these guys are manhandling. I know. Anyway, after a long race, with lots of people crashing, and the bump sending people off, Kyle Larson, then the five, who'd qualified fourth, got to the front and started dominating. After every yellow flag, he'd disappear, pull out a 2-second lead, and he was going to cruise it. But he was battling mainly with Michael McDowell. And this Michael McDowell at the previous stop had only put 2 tyres on. That's another trick. So you jumped several places before the next restart. And on one restart, McDowell got ahead of Larson. And all of a sudden, Larson's car's useless. Because again, like Formula One, they need clean air. You know, and if you're at the front and you've got a car set up for that, you can pull away. But by the time towards the end, his 4 tyres, new tyres, were now pretty worn out. And as soon as he was behind anybody else, and he dropped from first to like 5th or 6th in about 5 or 6 laps, just disappeared backwards. And meanwhile, to show how NASCAR can be exciting, 3 guys, Ross Chastain from 31st on the grid, Joey Logano from 27th on the grid, and Ryan Blaney from 24th on the grid, all suddenly appeared and caught up this Larson McDowell leading pair. And then those 3 then became the dominant cars to battle it out to the end. McDowell then crashed trying to stay with them, hit the wall hard. Not on the bump. That was because air got in the way. And in the end, Logano won from the other 2. So NASCAR.
Larson hasn't won in years.
Yeah, he's won. He's had a win. He won the Xfinity race on Saturday night in style. It was weird how slow his car was. You know,
it's funny you say about clean air. I wish I had £1 for every time Crofty said clean air.
A little footnote for NASCAR. Poor old Shane Van Gisbergen, we all raved about. You know, he was the Australian supercar champion. He came to America. He won his debut race in the rain at the street circuit somewhere in America. This glowing career, signed to do NASCAR. And he qualified 37th out of 38 and finished 22nd. He can't get these ovals right. He's not working. It's not working for poor old Shane. So there was plenty of entertainment at NASCAR this week. How much entertainment there was in Formula E and Monaco, I'm not so sure personally. I missed the first race, to be honest. The second one was wet. But again, apparently the first race, they've started refueling now, or plugging in, and one of the plugs didn't work. I think one of the teams.
It's just such a fuss. Such a fuss. They don't need to do it. Why are they doing it? They're so complicating it. But then we've just said, Tiff, that they should have 3 compulsory stops at Monaco, or 3 different tyres, 2 stops for 3 different tyres at Monaco. Yeah. So is this going to make it more exciting? Maybe at Monaco we should encourage it, but other tracks it's just a gimmick. They don't need the charge. No. They've got more than enough charge if they wanted to do a whole race flat out.
Certainly, but Oliver Rowland won it, who's dominated the championship. Taylor Barnard, our young Brit in a McLaren, was on pole, but he got pushed back in that race one. And of course, talking about McLaren, they're pulling out next year. So another, big team leaving Formula E. to allegedly not
Well,
because they dislike
James Barkley, you mentioned that as well, head of Jaguar Racing. He's leaving as well.
He's leaving next year. So,
which I was surprised that he's very dynamic. Maybe he's going to Formula One. I don't know, but because Land Rover JLR are going back into Dakar in this year or the end of this year.
yeah.
So I thought he would be quite interested in that. But he's more Formula One. He's very cool, very slick guy.
Might have been headhunted, but
yeah.
And I did see the wet race. The wet race was again because in the wet, because now their attack mode is too strong. It's the problem with their attack mode because it gets more power. And they go 4-wheel drive. And of course, in the wet, when you have 4-wheel drive and more power, I mean, they were just zapping past people. And in fact, it was bizarrely, out of all of this weirdness and who overtakes where, Sebastian Buemi won the second race. He was a champion. When was it? In 2016, he was the champion. And his last win was in 2019. And he's gone 78 races without a win. He almost dominated. He pretty much dominated the first two seasons.
I remember.
And he won with his Jaguar-powered Envision. Roland was second again. He's now got 115 points, which is 48 more than Felix da Costa in second place on 67. So he's pretty much cruising to the championship. Taylor Barnard came fourth in the race too, so he had a good run.
Nick Cassidy came third, and he started, I think, 16th or something. So he did well.
Well, it's this lottery, if you get all your moves right, and if you just take your time attack, and it's a luck. If you take your time attack and it goes to safety car or virtual safety car, then you don't use your attack mode. It's a lottery.
Somebody who's not very happy with Nick Cassidy though is Mr. Ticton, a certain Dan Ticton. He had a bit of a rage. He was entertaining.
He did a good spin turn.
He did a brilliant spin turn.
But that was he blaming the bloke on his left then for that crash?
Yeah.
Was he?
Of course, yeah.
He was
just saying everything's shit, everything's rubbish, everything.
That's Dan. So did you see Sam Burns shut? That terrified me. It was in qualifying on the second day, I think. And it was at Sainte Devote, the turn one. And he just came in like 50 miles an hour too fast, just straight on into that amazing barriers they have in this modern motorsport.
Wow.
He still sat in the car for a long time because I think the G-force and deceleration just stopped in the swidgy stuff. But it looks like brake failure. But the problem is they haven't got rear brakes. The rear braking is done by the regen, and then the computer decides how much front brake is put on to balance out the regen at the back. So it's a sort of, the balance goes backwards and forwards depending on the state of your battery. But they had added rear brakes in an emergency situation, I believe. But it didn't look like anything was almost, I think the fronts were locked up. But he went in so quick. I'd hate to drive these computer brake. You know, the early days of Formula One, a few went off when they had that brake by wire, didn't they? Way back.
Yeah, it'd be horrid, wouldn't it?
Red Bulls and a couple just, I've got no brakes. Really had no brakes. So I suppose they're entertained down in Monaco, but I still can't get into it. Too much weirdness going on. Now, what else we got?
World GT-ees?
Yeah, finally back home. The World GT-ees. There's a great long name, but what they really are, sprint version. We're at Brands Hatch for this magnificent field of, over 30 beautiful looking GT cars from BMWs and Mustangs and Ferraris and Mercedes and Lamborghinis. But they've outgrown tracks like Brands Hatch. And it's almost sad, that a track that is so, so glorious to drive around is, by modern standards, A, narrow, and B, not got long enough straights for them to get past. Also, GT3s, which I dislike, is they've got them in ABS, they've got traction control, so the chances of making a driver error are way, way down. The amateurs, bless them, but they're very close to their pros in terms of lap time. So, with all those drive rates, it's very rare that a professional is going to make an error and run wide. A couple of did, but there's just no overtaking. A magnificent line of fabulous GT cars, but not really racing. And we have this problem. We talked about it with Indycar now. We talked about Monaco F1, Indycar at Barber, and it is becoming a growing problem as our cars become more scientific. But wonderful. A Ferrari won one race, and Mercedes won the other one, but no overtaking.
How did Barber get on?
Yeah, the Barber Lamborghinis, they qualified about 10th in one race and finished about 10th. And they qualified 4th in race 2 and finished about 7th after they lost a wheel nut at a pit stop. Pit stops, of course, where you, again, the classic, that's where you win or lose, you know. If your pit stop's not quick as the other people, you'll lose the place. And then British Superbikes, still in Britain, still going today. We obviously are recording a bit early because I'm off to town tonight, because there's 2 more British Superbike rounds at Oulton Park, where you should be today, or you should have been today by the time you watch this. You should have come back from a wonderful weekend at Oulton Park, or Brands Hatch. You might have enjoyed the GTs yesterday. But Bradley Ray, the 2022 champion, is back. A champion who, like Scott Redding, another great champion we had at British Superbikes, went to World Superbikes and just can't get on with it. You know, we talked to, with our interview, we talked to the other 2, Kyle and Tommy, you know, about this transition to World Superbikes, because they, again, have got traction control and weird extra scientific computer aids. Whereas the British boys grow up on a bike that's just raw, and they have to ride the raw bike, and then they get to the front. But, you know, Bradley Ray, he finished 20th and 21st in his 2 World Superbike years. 20th and 21st. Having won the British Championship in 2022. Anyway, stuck it on pole as Yamaha on his return yesterday and won the first race at Oulton Park. Who did he beat? I've written it down somewhere, I can't read my own right. Glenn Irwin came through from 14th on the grid in the Ducati after a terrible qualifier to finish 2nd. Leon Haslam, who switched from BMW to Ducati, was a good 3rd. Kyle Ride 5th and Tommy Bribor 6th. But 2 more great races going on as we speak up at Oulton Park.
And finally?
I haven't got any more. What do you finally? Well, there's more race. Caterham's at Thruxton.
No,
they were.
They were. Yes, they were. But and finally, Vicky Piria.
Yes,
he had a P1 in class at Misano.
In class.
Well, I don't know whether it was in class or P1 overall, but I would say...
in class. No, they're in class. They were champions last year, I think.
Yeah.
I think, leaping up with joy. I'm surprised she's not Miami.
Right, yeah.
She's Formula One commentator. I don't know.
She's sort of the Brundle of Italian Sky Sports. So,
but nowadays they don't tend to do every race, do they? Because people say I can't commit to 24 weekends.
I saw Karun's post online, and he said that he's had 2 weeks and 30 flights or whatever it was. And so I miss him because we are a bit selfish, because when you have your favourites, the good commentators, you want to see them at every race, but it must be hard to get to every single race.
Mind you, Karun is sort of cashing in a lot at the moment, and I think the earnings are pretty impressive. But he was doing the Formula E.
Exactly.
So I think if he's so exhausted and tired, I think he could probably drop one of his jobs because he's got so many. I want Karun to be the FIA boss. I think he's so good. He's very intelligent.
He will be so good, and he wouldn't be
drivers,
and he understands that there's no place for corruption in sport. I'm not saying there's any corruption in Formula One for FIA, but. Yeah, he'll be exceptional.
Yeah.
What's on next week, Tiff? Where are we?
Loads next weekend. This weekend, the World Sports Cars at Spa. If you want to get in your car, drive through the tunnel, get to Spa. Wonderful racing around there. Or MotoGPs are at Le Mans. We go from Spa to Le Mans, but it's Le Mans. It's the little Bugatti circuit, which is great for bikes, useless for cars, but it's a bit tight even for bikes. It's about 5 hairpins and a couple of quick corners, but always spectacular racing. MotoGP at Le Mans. Over in America, loads going. The Indycars, as I said, are on the Indy road course with their new having to have 2 tyres of each type in the race. IMSA sports cars are around the magnificent Laguna Seca. So if you're in California on holiday, go there. NASCAR at Kansas, 1.5 mile oval. I like it. That's the best tracks, the 1.5 mile ovals. Down in Australia, mate, you can go to Tasmania for the supercars. Apologies for my accent. At the Simmons Plains Raceway, which is...
What's the capital of Tasmania?
I have no idea.
Hobart,
is it? Yeah, of course it is Hobart.
Sydney the Hobart race.
And then back home, the British Touring Cars for their second weekend at Brands short race track, Brands Indycar circuits. That's always a very entertaining day, or 2 days down at Brands Hatch. They'll sit on the bank and watch the entire race. They do
the full GP track, I guess.
No, Indy track. They do the full GP as their second round at Brands. They do both tracks.
Oh, that's a lot of cars.
Yeah, they'll be pushing and
jostling
shoving into clearways. They'll be bumper to bumper. But again, expect the Fords to dominate with the Hyundai, and maybe the BMWs will get better. I'm not sure it's a brand, but it's really BMW. They've only got Hill that's really experienced in the BMW, so they're a bit one-handed.
Where's the last race of the season? Is it Brands or is it Donington or is it neither?
Usually Brands GP. That's usually Brands now. Yeah, it's Brands GP.
Yeah, Jake Hill last year. It was really exciting, down to the wire, wasn't it?
Yeah. So yeah, busy weekend last weekend, busy weekend this weekend. Lots of races around the world for you to
You were
enjoy.
Gallivanting last week in Madrid.
You sneak away.
You got to witness the blackout.
I survived the 2025 Madrid blackout.
Good for you. And
queuing for a taxi, 3 hours up and down a long queue to get a taxi.
Think about all the old people, where you are old, but the older people that had nothing, no electricity or anything for over a day. So think yourself lucky. Thanks for joining. We'll see you next week.
Cheers.
Bye.